Yeah. Okay, sounds great. That I don't want other people? Okay. All right. I'm going to leave it on right now and then we can just test and then. Yeah, and my dad. Yep. Yeah, I came in and saved a spot. I knew she wouldn't be able to do the stairs, so. Um, no, I actually didn't bring one. If you have one handy, that would be fantastic. Thank you. Yes, now that I know that it works. Thanks.
lost that signal and and I wiggled it and it came back on. You know, we need media. Let's record this in case we lose the signal.
Card?
No, I don't have a card. How much time do we got? 4 minutes.
Be up there.
Get that, make sure we're on.
Yeah, I'm doing good. Yourself?
Thank you, George.
Gail.
Yeah. Dad right there, and my mom's in the very back row, talking with Gary.
So come here, I want to show you something. Yep. The problem with doing this one camera screen stuff, which I hate, is that the screen is brighter than the rest of the room. So in order to get the
And your mom. And my mom's in the pink in the back. Yep.
I have to get.
I saw your dad at
I'm gonna turn her off while she's talking like that.
Yeah.
I'm gonna
We'll see you
kill her
Thursday,
mic
and I'm
till
like,
she starts.
oh yeah,
Or you
Thursday.
could kill the
How are you
output.
doing? Good. I might.
What's going up there?
Is this, yes. Good day. Hello. Come on in, have a seat. This month's Cultural Thursday, we have Kari Frisch speaking on her fellowship in India just this January. And in just a moment, I'll speak more about that, but I want to remind you that next month, April 4th, we have Meg Foster, daughter of sociology instructor Scott Foster, speaking about her experience in Russia, and specifically how it is to travel independently, but also the research that they did on gender, or perhaps lack of gender equality, in the Russian space program. Tomorrow is the first day of spring break for Central Lakes College, and there are a couple of groups traveling abroad. We have a large group heading to London. We have another group that I'm leading to Mexico, and we'll be staying with families in Mexico and going to classes. It'll all be immersion. There's one of my participants. And we will be speaking, probably Hal will be speaking on that experience in May. So you can look forward to that the first Thursday in May. So, and then just one more note, this is Women's History Month. Yesterday we had a kickoff event. Starting the Monday when we get back from spring break, we have a number of events. Like I said, starting Monday, March 19th, or March 18th, the history of birth control. The 19th, Finding Our Voice Through Art Practices by Ojibwe artist Adrian Benjamin. The 21st, a TED Talk on listening to shame. The 25th, a journal of healing, hope, and empowerment through traveling. And the 27th, leadership, gender roles, and communication, creating inclusion. And the 28th, understanding and disengaging from patriarchy in the systems around us, what it really means to be a man, by Scott Foster. These posters can be found hanging around campus, so if you missed any of that information and you'd like to check them out or what day of the week that is, please do. So Kari is, her fellowship was sponsored by the KORC, and I'll let her explain that, and the American Institute of Indian Studies. And I just wanted to point out a part of culture, we call these Cultural Thursdays. The elements as a language teacher that we talk about are products, practices, and perspectives. And I think Kari will be touching on all three of those. So please welcome me in joining Kari Frisch. Thanks.
Thank you, Tracy, and hopefully everybody can hear me okay. I'm gonna use this mic instead of the podium mic because I have a tendency to kind of walk around a little bit. As Tracy said, my name is Kari, and I'm an instructor here at the college, and one of the things I'm known for is taking a lot of photos. So my first photo is gonna be of you, so everybody wave. All right, good job, thank you very much. I did do a fellowship just this past January, and it was a whirlwind of a tour. We were on the go a lot, did a lot of things, saw a lot of things, tasted a lot of things. So it's really hard for me to try and condense everything I learned about India down into a 50-minute presentation. So hopefully you're ready for a whirlwind tour just like I had. So the first thing I need to explain is the title, Eat, Learn, Explore. Now I know some of my fellow educators out there is looking at me like, come on now, you're a teacher, and the first thing that you put in your title is eat. I mean, that implies that eating is more significant than learning, and that learning should be the first thing that you mention, and then maybe exploring and then eating. Because with eating being in the very beginning of my presentation, it implies that, I don't know, like I'm a food addict or something, or that I'm one of those people that takes pictures of their food and constantly posts them on Facebook. Well, okay, that is true. I do that. And food definitely has relevance to the way I travel, and hopefully the way those of you that are out there traveling, it's a very big part of culture. And I am going to talk about food, and I am going to talk about some of the different things I experienced in terms of food. But as an educator, I am going to try and start with the learning. The way I did my presentation, the Eat, Learn, Explore, basically follows kind of our days. When I was on the fellowship, we would start in the morning with a huge buffet breakfast. And so there was a lot of food. And then we did a lot of learning, a lot of sessions, and a lot of exploring. So I kind of went the sequential route, but definitely eating is important, and I will get to that. But even if I don't, I want to make sure that I mention that I created a blog after I got back. When I was in India, I decided to try and journal every single day, write a short paragraph, and the more I caught up with the time zone, the longer my journal entries became on Facebook. And I thought, I don't want those to disappear. And I also went through my photos every single day and tried to include some that I thought maybe my family and friends would enjoy. So after I got back, I started a blog with that same title, Eat, Learn, Explore India. And so I want to make sure that you know that that is going to be available to you. It's going to be something that is open, and hopefully where I can share this PowerPoint. So as I'm going through this speed version of my trip, if there's something that intrigues you, I'm hoping to have links to different resources where you can go back and further explore the things that caught your attention, or to those of you that are my fellow educators, things that you can use in your classroom. Feel free to use those resources. So again, Eat, Learn, Explore India, and it's housed on Blogspot. So even if you remember a few of those words, you go back online, you do a search with my name, you should be able to pull that up. I'm also going to be working on this throughout the summer, adding additional resources, going in and putting captions with my pictures. So please know that that is something that you can go in and check right now. It's a live site, but I encourage you to come back to it often and check it out, because I am going to, or even better, follow me, because then you'll know when new things are posted. So let's go ahead and get started. So just a quick, brief background about the fellowship. This all came about for me very, very fast. I didn't find out about the fellowship until the fall and had to kind of make some quick decisions. It was, as Tracy mentioned, it was sponsored by the Council of American Overseas Research Centers, otherwise known as KORC, and the American Institute of Indian Studies. And so the fellowship was designed by these two councils that are nonprofit, funded by State Department, Carnegie. There's lots of big bucks going in towards KORC, and part of that is to sponsor different faculty development opportunities. And the one thing about this one that I really liked was that it was focused on community colleges and minority serving institutions. That's something that we don't often get. A lot of times opportunities that are out there are for people who have their doctorate or are doing research. So this was a really exciting opportunity that KORC and the American Indian Institute put out for us. And because those two groups came together, they were able to select 16 of us. And the 16 of us came from all over the United States. You can see some of the disciplines that we represent, a variety of different liberal arts, from English, communication, history, political science, and again, from the north, from Minnesota to Texas, and from California to New York. I guess Minnesota to Texas, and New York to California. So we were a quite diverse group. And if any of you have traveled on different tours, the one thing that was really cool for me is that we were all very like-minded individuals, instructors coming from similar institutions, and we were together for 2 solid weeks, almost 3 for some of us, and we got along super well, which was a really cool experience. And we're still communicating with each other today. We have our own group that's through WhatsApp that people are posting things almost daily. And even last night on Facebook, a couple of us were visiting. And so these definitely are relationships and networks that are going to continue to help us all. One quick shout out here. I'll go back. If you're not familiar with Country Inn and Suites, this was one of the hotels that we stayed at, but it's a Minnesota-based company. It started in Minnesota. So I thought that was pretty cool. And so this is a picture of all of us with some of the workers from the Country Inn and Suites. And apparently I did not get the memo that it was Black and Blue Day. So the fellowship was designed to look at the north of India by studying 2 cities, and then South India with 2 cities. So you can see Delhi and Jaipur up here in the north, and down here in the south, Bengaluru, which is the old way of saying Bangalore, and now, again, the new way of saying Bangalore. They're trying to go back to more of the indigenous ways of how the cities are known to the locals. So Bengaluru and Mysuru versus Mysore. But if you hear those terms, or if I use them interchangeably, it's because they just changed back in 2014. So as you can see here, we left on January, or I left on January 2nd, and drove to the cities. And from the cities, I took a flight to Newark. Now, at this point, I didn't know anybody, and even in Newark, I was on the same plane with some people, but I didn't know who they were, my fellowship awardees. And it was a long flight, a very long flight. But eventually, we did get to Delhi. And from Delhi, we got past baggage claim, and that was the first time that I saw a sign for AIIS, and the first time that I got to see who some of the people in my group were going to be. Up to this point, we had had one short conference call, didn't really know anybody else, and so that was our first time meeting each other, and we hit the ground running. We went straight to the hotel, got a very small amount of sleep, and started our day the next day. So as you could see, India is about halfway around the world and is 11 and a half hours different in time zones. So just an example here, if it's 2 o'clock in the afternoon, it would be 1:37 a.m. tomorrow. So it was kind of hard trying to coordinate conversations back home. But again, it was really kind of a tough adjustment for our bodies because it's almost exactly opposite. You're sleeping when normally you're awake and awake when you're normally sleeping. So those first sessions where we had speakers all day long, that first evening was kind of rough, but eventually we did make it. And here you can kind of see the size of India compared to the United States. So again, the purpose of our trip was to learn about urban sustainability. And urban sustainability covers a lot of different things, and so we kind of learned about it from a lot of different resources: professors, private businesses, nonprofit organizations, public officials, activists, and advocates. We had a lot of different contexts of how we learned. We got some readings. Again, this all happened super fast. So I applied in September, didn't find out that I was accepted, one of the 16 people chosen, until mid to late October. November was basically spent trying to figure out whether or not this was really even real. We didn't have a lot of communication. I didn't get my plane tickets until December 18th. That was when I went, okay, I think this is really for sure. I guess I have a plane ticket, I'm going. But it was a big kind of leap of faith. I didn't know who I was really going with, what exactly we were going to be doing. We had some readings that we had been given ahead of time. But a lot of what we experienced was that firsthand experience right there in India. And that's kind of one of my mottos, is I really believe in, I call it teaching to the first degree equals learning to the infinite. Like the more personal your learning can be, the greater the opportunity to make it deeper and personalized learning. So it was really fun to be able to have that firsthand experience. And that's going to come into play in a few slides from here. The way that urban sustainability was kind of framed for us was in 3 prongs: environmental, economic, and social factors. And what we quickly learned was that there was a lot of different solutions, technologies, organizations, approaches, and different aspects of culture that needed to come together in order to create sustainable urban planning. Or in this case, kind of a disconnect. It was much easier to see where that urban sustainability was kind of falling apart. I love this picture for a lot of different reasons. You can kind of see some of the smog in the background, street vendors, what we call informal economy, people making their living on the streets. Uber is super cheap over there. I think a 15-minute ride cost me about $1.03. So, and that was for the whole group. So what we kind of ended up seeing was that there was a lot of good trying to be done in India, but there was a lot of bad and what I'll classify as kind of the ugly. So that's kind of how I'm framing what I learned about urban sustainability here for you: the good, the bad, and the ugly. So I'm going to start with the positive. Some of the positive things that we encountered, actually these 3 organizations were all on the first day, our very first morning. So that kind of gives, just the morning. So that kind of gives you an idea of how fast information was coming at us. But the Yamuna River Project, working on restoring water bodies and ecological parks. Again, this is in the north. National Guidelines for Responsible Conduct, a large document that encourages business to think about how they not only treat their workers, but how they treat what they're producing. So for example, if you're a business that sells soda in a container, what happens and who's responsible for that straw after your consumer consumes the soda in the glass? Now, just because it's in the document and they're trying to work on it doesn't mean they're doing a good job of actually getting that follow through, and we'll talk a little bit about that. But the guidelines are really interesting. Anytime that you see something underlined in blue here, that means it is a link. So when that PowerPoint becomes available to you, if, let's say, you're a business instructor out there and you want to take a look at this, that is going to be something that will bring you to another resource. One of the non-governmental organizations, or NGOs, that we encountered was SEEDS, Sustainable Environment and Ecological Development Society, and their motto was protecting the lives and livelihoods. That's kind of a common theme. There's a balance that needs to be in place with the geology and nature and the people in order for them to live and thrive. So I wanted to make sure that I included that here. Another NGO that we had the opportunity to visit was the Child Rights Trust in Bengaluru. Their motto is every right for every child. They work very hard at trying to do statistics and finding ways to document what's happening with children in India, specifically in Bengaluru, and then advocating for those rights of those the children, whether they're male or female. Just kind of an FYI here, the UN Convention of the Rights of the Child. I do believe, if I'm understanding everything correctly, this lady was one of the individuals from this organization that went to Geneva to help advocate for children's rights. And this convention created a document that almost 200 countries have ratified, and the United States is one of them that has not, one of the few that has not. Another good thing, another positive on the list was we got to visit the Lal Bal Botanical Gardens. This was a spot where they really focused on diversity, protecting green space, and they brought in trees from all over the world so that they would have diverse flora and fauna, and to have that focus on nature, and to have a communal spot where the public could come and actually be together in nature. And so it's kind of restoring and keeping the green available to the public, which is something that does not happen a lot in India, we found out. So this was a cool spot to visit. I see Dave out there. I saw Dave come in. Dave is our geologist, and this particular spot also had one of the oldest exposed rocks on the earth, from what we've been told. Between 3 and 4 billion years old, the Lal Bal rock up here at the formation you can kind of see, and just a little bit of the flora and fauna that they protected here. Another spot that we visited was the Zero Waste Management Plant in Mysuru, where they collect a lot of garbage and sort it, compost what they can, and provide that compost free to farmers in the area. If you can see this sign, or if you come back to it, you'll see that they visit daily 10,000 homes and collect, I think it's 7 tons of waste, and then it's hand sorted. The dry is hand sorted and then recycled and sold out to be recycled, and the selling of those, the plastics and the metals, is what they then gather the money to pay the salaries for the pickers. Again, although we did see a lot of good, there was a lot of things that caused concern. Okay, here's where I have to do one of my disclaimers. As a communication person, it's my job to admit that this is not a perfect slide. 1, there's way too much text on it. 2, I am going to proceed to read a lot of the text on this. But my parents are here, and there's other people in the audience who maybe have hearing and sight issues. And so also knowing that I'm going to be putting these into my classes, please forgive me. But I want you to know, as a communication person, I know this is not a great PowerPoint slide, but it's done for a reason. So some of the things that we discovered very quickly was the impact of the population explosions. Currently, 1 in 6 people in the whole world live in India, and that number is growing. In just 10 years, 2001 to 2011, India grew by 17.7%, and it's expected just in that 40 years that it doubled in size, and that is a good possibility of those trends are continuing to happen. So you can see that things that are bad are only going to get exponentially worse because there's more people and more waste and less land. And so a lot of these things are interwoven together. And so it's hard to talk about things like urban sustainability and culture without separating nature and nurture and culture and waste and sewage and access to clean water. So when the Indian cities first began to grow, there wasn't a lot of structure and planning, so they didn't have that infrastructure for sewage and landfills. And then the cities grew fast, and there was lack of resource management. There's lack of resource education. The water is not always available. We know that a lot of the people are at poverty or lower, and those people are not the ones that are going to have water in their homes. Slums might have access to a water tap or might be reliant strictly on a tank to come in and bring water. The tanks are dependent on being able to get water. So when water does come in, there can be large crowds and fights that occur because people are struggling for those basic resources of clean water. I wrote here, one of the resources said that 1 in 15 days maybe is when you would get water. There was one gentleman who said he remembered a time where it was once the entire month that they were able to get water. So just think about that and how much water we go through on an everyday basis here with our showers, running your water as you brush your teeth, just constant things that we take for granted. And even when we were there in India, the bottled water that was given to us, because our systems are not prepared to live in India. The bacteria and the food have things that our bodies just are not used to because we have different regulations here, and our bodies have just can't fight the same type of bacteria. But it goes way beyond that. I mean, the basic water and food is not safe for a lot of people in India either, and their systems are used to a lot of it. So some of the water that they do have, we heard a lot about leakages, like a lot of the pipes are leaking. People would do illegal bore wells into spots to try and steal water from the groundwater. Electricity would go out. It happened to us when we were there. We were having presentations and electricity would pop off and on. Urban sprawl, meaning that people are moving to the cities because it's getting harder in the rural areas to get access to clean water. And the cities are growing so fast, and they're again not protecting some of the green space. So it's becoming what they call concretized, meaning a lot of concrete. So that is taking away the green space, and then in the monsoon seasons, when there's a lot of rain, there's nowhere for the water to go. So flooding is becoming an increasing issue. So you can see how all of these things are connected together. Then you get into things like gender bias and the patriarchy and sexism and female infanticide. It's still occurring. If you don't know what that means, that's that you can tell the gender of a baby. Sometimes the baby is aborted if it's female, and sometimes it's done after the child is born. Because there's just kind of an ideology that female is going to be more expensive to raise and is not as valuable as a male. So a lot of things that are just hard cultural things to change. We know about marginalized communities. Slums are increasing and poverty is increasing, and so therefore the slums increase even more. Mumbai currently is 50% slums. And again, no sewage, no water. You know, the livelihoods that are just in jeopardy. School completion rate, poverty, malnourishment, child labor. I put here locals being exploited and what's kind of known as a beggar mafia. They're kind of people who are taking advantage of the tourists that are now coming over to India. And there's a lot of people who beg just for food or to buy something, but it's turned into a business for people not at the level of who's doing the begging, but kind of the people who they're pimping out, basically. So it's almost, it's harmful to give money to beggars because it's contributing to the cycle of kind of an institutionalized begging system where the more injured you are, so sometimes people are specifically maimed and injured with the thought that people will give them more money. So you're contributing to this kind of scary culture, and you never know where is the line of trying to help, and are you really helping or are you hurting? So again, there's a lot that I would consider bad, but we haven't even gotten to the worst of it. Quickly, each one of these has a story with them. This is like going to the corruption. The corruption is institutionalized. It's in the government, it's in individuals, it's in the politics, it's in the culture. Blatantly right out in the open. We saw people trying to bribe policemen. Here's an illegal water well. This is, as I was kind of trying to get at with the begging system, even in the middle of the streets, coming up to you at the stoplights. In anywhere that there are people, there are beggars. And this is an interesting situation that I know I don't have enough time to go into, but we very rarely, we got along really well, and so we'd often sit mingled together, males and females. But this one day when we were at a municipal site, we somehow, as inevitably it sometimes happens, the guys sat on one side and the women sat on the other side, and it was a horseshoe kind of table area. I noticed right away that I was not being looked at, and it made me stop listening right away, and I spent the entire hour counting how long or how many times I was looked at by the presenter. 3 times in 45 minutes for less than 30 seconds total. Otherwise, he spoke mainly to the half that had the men on it. So this is just kind of that institutionalized gender bias that I'm sure he probably wasn't even aware of occurring. Okay, so that was bad, but guess what? It gets even worse. Here's some of the ugly. 70% of India's water is contaminated. Arsenic, fluoride, salinity, nitrates, fertilizers, feces, sewage, ashes from cremation, garbage, and other pollutants. Some lakes burst into flames. Some rivers are covered under a thick detergent-like foam. When we were there, we saw the garbage. We didn't see, but this was from one of the slides that one of our presenters shared. Again, toxic pollution. And in Indian culture, water is very ceremonial. It's used for a lot of different reasons, not just for drinking and not for bathing, which that's done a lot. So people are actually, you go online, you just put in toxic froth Indian, you'll get tons of photos of people swimming in these polluted toxins. And here again, you can see the fire that just combusts because of how toxic it is. Surface water, even more contaminated. 20% of the country's disease burden just from the contaminated water. We're not talking air pollution yet. Many of the lakes have dried up. So again, you go back to the livelihood issue of people who rely on that for food and for the reeds that they weave into their baskets and sell, for daily consumption, the ecological systems, the flora, the fauna, the birds, everybody else that's reliant on lakes. And you have no lake, you have a lot of things that are affected and not in a positive way. This last one, really scary. 21 major cities in India predicted to run out of clean groundwater by 2020. Groundwater, period, not even clean. We could see why. This was a common thing that we passed. This is a holy temple, and even if at the holy temple, their water is not clean. And that's a place that has great significance to people. So it's just very common. There's no landfills. There's nothing else. I mean, you have to bathe, you have to drink, you have your cultural rituals that are meant to protect you, and what's meant to protect you is, in some cases, doing more harm. Here again, a river barely flowing, but what you can see is all the garbage. This was taken out of a bus window. Okay, so, sorry, it's going to get even worse. Just to put it in perspective, one of the cities that we went to, Jaipur, has approximately 17,000 people living in 1 square mile. That's almost the population of Brainerd and Nisswa put together, living in 1 square mile. And we're not talking fancy condos and high-rises, right? We're talking slums and hard living. 15 of the 20 most polluted cities in the world are in India. 45% of Delhi has no sewage system. Okay, there's a whole bunch of, feminism articles too about the safety of women, where if there's no place for them to go to the bathroom, how they have to leave their jobs where they're working in the fields to go someplace that is safe for them to just go to the bathroom, and they lose out on the livelihood or they're attacked on their way there. So there's a lot of, again, things that tie into this that are really super scary, and again, we take for granted. When you use the bathroom today, which all of you are going to do, I want you to think about this, because there are many places in the world that do not have access to safe toilets. And it's a health issue. It's a livelihood issue. Safety is just things that we take for granted. So you can see here there's a lot of other really bad things, but I want to point this one out. The particulate matter. I had one guy in my group that was always talking about the PMs. The PMs are at blah, 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 and you throw out these numbers, which didn't really mean anything to me until I came home and I was trying to put together stuff for this PowerPoint. And I have to tell you, like, even when I was in India, it hurt to breathe. And I sent a text to a friend. I said, is there a way to do a lung cleanse when you come back? Because I feel like that's what I need. I need to cleanse my lungs because it was so hard to breathe. But putting together this information and the resources that are linked here caused me almost to go back to that spot. I mean, my chest was hurting last night as I was reading these. And one of the articles talked about it being at apocalyptically horrendous levels. And I thought, that's exactly it. The levels of the particle, the dust, and the pollution are so high, it goes above the scale. The scale only goes to 500, and it has gone over 500. The day I flew in, it was at 448. In the U.S., safety levels need to be under 35. That's a big difference. It was so bad that people who flew in the day before I did, there were 4 of them that came in, no, one that came in from London because she was coming from Christmas break. Her flight could not land because the skies were so polluted that they had to be rerouted and wait 6 hours before they could come back to land. That's how polluted it is. And again, firsthand experience, I can show you these pictures. I can give you those stats about it being 448, but it's something different when you are breathing this or trying to breathe. We could taste it in the planes as we were flying into our cities. It just sat heavy in our lungs. And I had the privilege of knowing mine was short term, and I still worried about my health. I can't imagine people living in this every day, day in and day out, and they're not, and we'll get to those statistics. This is one of my friends. She and another gal decided to go out for a short run. They thought maybe they'd go a mile, even though they're used to running marathons. So a mile was very, very short. They didn't even make it 4 blocks. This, and again, science people, you might be able to help me out here. This photo was taken on the plane, and this is, I believe, what's called an inversion layer, meaning the pollution and the toxins kind of like sit at a certain level that it's a visible line of thick, terrible, nasty pollutants. Again, common what we saw, common to what's happening across India. Pollution comes from a lot of different things, businesses and homes, garbage being burnt on the streets, farms being burnt, the lands. So you can see what used to be known as a garden city, Bangalore, has proceeded to become what's now kind of a dead city. Okay, again, this is a lot of horrible things, and I don't mean to dismiss it, and it's all really important, but we also knew that there's not a lot that any of us could do there. None of us were urban sustainability doctorates, having done lots of research. We weren't there to discover the answers, but I think what it did for each of us was, one, make us kind of reflect back on what's happening here in our own homes and across the United States. So I really want to challenge you, because I'm sure it kind of crossed some of your minds too. It's really easy to do what I call displace. Place the problem on them over there. Oh, those Indians, look at how dirty it is. That's so gross. Look at all the garbage out there. But keep in mind that we as Americans produce more waste in 1 year than the average Indian does in their entire lifetime. That New York is the most wasteful city in the world when it comes to garbage. You know, so it's really easy to say that's their problem. We just have the benefit of having landfills where it's out of sight, out of mind. But our garbage is still going someplace, right? And here's my shout out to Gary Payne, who, as a student here, way back in the 80s, late 80s, Gary took our class, Culture and the Environment, out to a landfill. God, I can't believe I'm almost going to cry over this, Gary. I remember getting out of the bus, and Gary said we were standing on like 12 feet of garbage, and all I could see was garbage around me. To think that that's garbage, and it doesn't go away. It takes forever for some stuff to decompose, and even some stuff doesn't, right? So we don't get that privilege of stopping and thinking about where our garbage goes often after we put it in the garbage, you know? So stop and think about that too, because we're just as wasteful, if not more so. It's just more evident in India. So I wanted to throw these out there, and again, if you come back to my PowerPoint or remember it in your head, the United Nations, the SDG stands for Sustainable Development Goals. This is something that they put out there for the whole world. Things that we should all be focused on, things like gender equality, educating children, taking care of the environment. This is a great resource for those of you that are students. But in one of those sites, they have what's called Be the Change. And it's a great way to kind of look at what you can personally do. And I love this. This is another one of their resources. The Lazy Person's Guide to Saving the World. We can all do something a little bit better, right? And so I encourage you to check out those links because, again, it's real easy to say, oh boy, India, oh, gross. But there's a lot of really wonderful things happening in India and a lot of really horrible things happening back here at home too. So be careful not to displace. And keep learning and keep exploring. So I don't want to end on the negatives, so I'm going to go back to looking at things from a positive light again. And one of the things we discovered in India is that they did a good job of understanding the importance of looking back in order to move forward. Looking at how people, indigenous folks used the land. They didn't just strip everything because they knew if everything was gone, their livelihood would be gone, right? So they used it conservatively and in ways that would benefit both man and nature. One of the other things that they, I think, did a good job of is sustainable culture, like making sure that their traditional dances and arts were not just valued, but taught to the children. So here we have the classical dance from the north and classical dance in the south. And again, resources, if you come back to the PowerPoint, you can see some videos and catch more information about that. The arts, the blue pottery, something that goes way, way, way back, making sure that generation after generation still knows how to create it by hand and that it's valued. This paper product place recycles cloth and paper and creates new paper products to replace plastic bags because we know plastic does not go away. So they also do a really good job of developing a community. So this particular company hires a lot of Muslim women and sustains practices in that community. So it's a business that can thrive in that community, and things that are focused on is more than just what's done at work. Here is one of the paper bags that they produce, and I wanted to include this because it also had these little glasses on here. When you see these glasses, is there anybody from India that you think of when you see those? Gandhi, yep. So when I was there, this is one of the coolest things. It was his 150th anniversary of his birth. And so around India, you would commonly see glasses shaped like this on walls and in here on a fence or a wall. And Gandhi is already on most, if not all, of the currency, the paper bills. But it was really just kind of a cool thing to see. So I wanted to throw that out there. We also got to go visit a couple of different stores besides the paper product place. We saw the hand printing, the hand block printing. So right here is rugs, but they were also making fabric. I'm wearing a skirt that has an example of the hand block that's done. Sorry for everybody at home that I just probably blew out your ears. So again, those crafts and those the artistry And the pride that comes with that is still very much alive. This is a store that is kind of popular in India. A lot of people, some of my friends who've been to India also had shopped there, but they focus on the small community. And instead of bringing things to the big city, they have the art done in the small communities and trying to keep the rural areas alive. They do things like veterinary services and education. So they treat the whole community and not just see people as a labor force. We also got to see some of the different grassroots organizations and youth movements while we were there, which again is how some change is going to happen. And I included this because it was one of the things that one of our speakers said, and it really resonated with me, is that sometimes, and I know I do this, I kind of want change right now. If I want something to happen, I want it to happen right now, or I want it to get there how I think we should get there, which is in the most straight, most efficient, get there now. And he said, sometimes you have to be okay going northwest to get north. And I like that. You know, you're not going to change corruption in India and get everybody not to be corrupt. But is there a way that you can kind of work with that system and try and educate and try and at least still head in the right direction? Because that's a more realistic way of getting someplace. So again, not all doom and gloom. We did get to see a lot of amazing things. Hang on, this is where your whirlwind part is going to come in. Again, lots of links, so you can come back if there's something that sparks your interest. But we got to explore a lot. Albert Hall Museum, the Hawa Malal, the Wind Palace. We got to see Old Jaipur, otherwise known as the Pink City. You can see how the buildings are pink. I like this one because a lot of people see the Hindu symbol and associate it with what? Nazis. But it's a Hindu symbol. And so I like putting that in there for my students. A lot of sense of community still in these old historic places. A lot of temples, a lot of different religions in India. We got to see parks and palaces. This was a gorgeous palace, and there happened to be a wedding there, and I cannot imagine the millions of dollars probably being spent on that wedding, because it was incredible, but like a really cool thing to have happen while we were there. So this is the Mysore University. It was a building that was built for one of the Maharaja's daughters and then given to the university. It was one of our field trips. This is a gentleman who is actually restoring the architecture. And we got to hear how, of course, the architects from London came in, right? British rule, we know better. This is what we need to do. And the local people was kind of tough because you can't always stand up, but they knew their land. They knew their mud. They knew the products that should be used, because you go someplace different and what works one place isn't going to work another. So it was really interesting to hear those stories of relying on the local knowledge. The Red Fort, beautiful place. Lots of great architecture and intricate designs. Granite, marble. Down here on the stage, I did bring a few things with me. One of them is like the white marble that is used in the Taj Mahal, and you can see some of the gemstones that are also used in the little elephant that's down there. It's the same type of gem work that's done up here. Just beautiful, beautiful buildings. We also got to experience the Chandni Chowk Market, which is a 17th century, so built in around the 1600s market, that these buildings are like really super narrow. You can get everything from fabrics to food. But one of the things they're most known for is the tight quarters. You can see how close the buildings are. And all of these wires that, as the city developed, all these raw wires hang over, and they're everywhere. But it kind of adds to this kind of like cool effect. And it was one of the most fascinating places to be. I think we walked 7 miles that day around this little market area. Another palace, beautiful spot that is huge, of course, because it used to be the palace, that had even elephants on its compound, had temples. It is open to the public. You have to take off your shoes, as you do in a lot of different places, or specifically in temples, but even in the palace, we had to take off our shoes. This is one of the temples on the property, and there was a lot of people there that day. Beautiful both inside and out. You can just kind of see the intricate, ornate statues and paintings and columns. That's one of the seats that the Maharaja would be carried to the, like down a procession to the grand entryway where performances would be done for him. But there was a lot of people there, and I had to throw this slide in here as a reminder. Again, just like in our country, we have a lot of field trips where children are taken different places. The day that we were at this palace, there were a lot of schools that were visiting. And we became, and this happened not just at the palace, we became kind of like celebrities. People would see us, and kids would stare at us, but it was mainly the adults that would come up and ask to have their picture taken. Or sometimes they would just like force somebody over to us, and then the person would take a photo of them standing next to us, you know. Because oftentimes we would have somebody, you know, showing us intricate architecture or something, and so they didn't want to interrupt, but they would, you know, come over and join our group and, you know, do a photo. But I turned it around because I thought, if every time I'm going to have a selfie with somebody else, I should take a selfie so I have them too. So this is just a very small handful of the number of times that I was approached to have a picture. And I think in part, there were 3 of us that were blonde, which is something that's a little bit more unusual. But I also had short hair, and I think that was something that stood out as well too. But again, I was a recipient of as many great photos back, so I didn't mind. We also got to see a monkey temple, which was very, very cool. As part of the monkey temple, you go further up the mountain, and there's a sun temple. A beautiful view of the city of Jaipur from up there. We also had a special blessing up there at the temple, which was pretty memorable for me. Again, there's lots of different religions, a lot of Hindu, obviously, but right next to one of our hotels was a Sikh temple. So again, you would see a variety. Buddhism, one of our leaders was Buddhist, and when we visited his home, there were statues of Buddha inside his home. And one of my most memorable and favorite things was my very last day when I went to the Gandhi Museum. The museum is located in Delhi, and I had to take an Uber there all by myself to get there, but I don't regret it for 1 minute. Gandhi was known for being a leader of the people, being of and for the people, and so the spinning wheel became a symbol for him because that's a common thing that people used in their livelihood. So there, as part of the museum, there was a whole tribute to spinning wheels. The museum had a lot of artifacts. I couldn't believe the number of artifacts they had. This is one of his walking sticks that he used. I think this was one that he used when he did the 241-mile march. So that, to me, was kind of cool. His shoes, pair of glasses. I get like really like excited about this kind of stuff. The museum, again, was not very busy the day that I was there, but it had some cool features, including he had gone to a doctor and they had printed out his heart rate, and so they replicated his heart rate. And so you could put on a set of headphones and hear his heartbeat. I mean, I get goosebumps just thinking about it now. They also had telephones set up where 2 were in Hindi and 1 was in English, or 2 were in English and 2 in Hindi. And you could pick up the phone and you could hear him giving one of his speeches. So that was pretty cool. There was a lot of beautiful artwork there as well. And it even had the garments that he was wearing the day that he was assassinated, and the bullets, one of 3 bullets that shot him, they found and saved. Again, I mentioned this earlier, but it was the 150th anniversary of his birth. So it kind of felt like a magical thing for me to be able to be at that museum during that time period. And of course, no trip to India would be complete without a visit to the Taj Mahal. It was not part of our fellowship, so 4 people came in early to visit the Taj Mahal, and 6 of us stayed late afterwards. The Taj Mahal is as beautiful as you would expect it to be, and it had recently gone under some renovation, so it might be hard to see in the slide, but the towers you can see were recently cleaned, so they're nice bright white, and the onion up here still has yet to go, so it's a little bit more still discolored from the pollution, but it was beautiful. And again, in case you're not familiar, it's in Agra, which is south of Delhi. So we had to take like a 5-hour car ride to get there. So that's how, again, if you remember the big map at the very beginning, that distance is 5 hours by car. So again, a big facility. It has its own mosques, its own very beautiful, intricate stonework, which this is part of the Quran that, I think I have another slide here too, was designed, and again, these are old buildings, but this was designed so that people from the street level would be able to read it as if the perception was eye level. But if you were to like hover like from a drone eye level and look at it directly, it would be distorted. So they purposely distorted it so from the ground level you could read it as if it wasn't distorted. Along the Yamuna River, and again, just a beautiful spot and one of the things that I'll remember forever. Lots of markets. Spices and foods, old textbooks, powder that they use to decorate and make the artwork on the sidewalks. I'm not sure what that's called. I need to still look that up. And of course, we did some shopping. I did bring a few things down here to the stage. If afterwards you want to come and take a look, I have a little elephant that has the same white marble that's used in the Taj Mahal. And again, I talked about the gem and the inlay work that's done on it. You can take a look at that. Paper product from the Salem paper place that we visited. There's some chai spices that you can smell and some clothing that you can take a look at if you want. Woodwork was pretty popular. Brass, elephants, those are the type of things you see commonly in the markets. Of course, the beautiful saris. A lot of women still wear saris today. Spices. In fact, we all did so much shopping that there were 16 of us, only one person did not have to buy a new bag. The rest of us had to buy a bag just for all the stuff we bought. And I packed light, knowing I was going to bring stuff home. But again, one of my favorite things, too, is just looking at the people and the culture. These are real cobras. So these are snake charmers, actually playing and the snakes coming out. Modern dress as well as traditional. And yes, Tracy, this is for you. My holy cow. Especially up north, cows were everywhere, in the streets, right in the middle of traffic with you. This one happens to be in front of a jewelry store. And you can see another one in the background there. Again, just very, very common. Sometimes people would have them next to their businesses and would take care of them, feed them, and other times they were just roaming free. We were able to be a part of some welcoming ceremonies where we received a bindi. And I told you at the Sun Temple we had a ceremony there. And there's a lot of names for this red string, the Mali or Kalava or Kalawa. It was tied. I'm having problems with my mic, sorry. It was tied around my wrist as a sign of protection, and I still have it. I think I will wear it until it naturally falls off. But that's part of the idea. A lot of Hindi traditions revolve around using that to bind. You'll see binding at weddings. You'll see binding on trees. This peepal tree is very significant to a lot of different religions. Hinduism and Buddhism. Buddha was thought to rest underneath the Bodhi tree, which is also the peepal tree, or peepal tree. If you Google it, there'll be lots of different spellings. And one of the traditions is to walk around the tree and tie the string and think about your marriage and kind of the concept of a single string might be very weak, but if you I think it's 108. It's got there's a number, but if you have 108 of them together, it's much stronger than one individual. So it's kind of just seen everywhere. A lot of red and yellow yarn string, the mali or kalawa. Of course, we experienced Indian traffic. You can see here tuk-tuks, motorcycles, buses, cars, everything weaving in and out. I did have video here, but you'll have to come back and try and play it. Lots of horns being used. Lots of livestock also in the streets. Here you can see again, and cows always have the right of way. We caught a theater folk festival, which had great puppets and masks, musicians, local artists. Here you can see some of the painting that's done on the streets. And we even got to see a Bollywood film, which again, if you have access to the PowerPoint, I do not have a clip of the film that we saw, which is probably illegal, so don't report me. One interesting thing about that, frequently you'll see different lines, male and female line. At the ticket booth here for that big theater was one of those places. It's also a place where the guy thought he could chip me money because he didn't think as a tourist I could do math, which normally I'm not very good at, but I did know that he did not give me my right change. So inside of the theater. And of course the food. So I'm going to end with food just like I started with the food. There was a lot of great meals consumed. We did have Indian food 3 times a day for almost 3 weeks. So I did have to take a break, and I just made Indian food for the first time at home the other night again, because it was a lot. I like spicy food, but it was a lot. We had one day where we had pizza, but just really super good food and a lot of different flavors. You'll see that we even had a cooking class. That was fun too. So a lot of different sauces are used, curries, chutneys, a lot of different breads and fancy desserts. You often would have multiple things on your plate at once. And I wanted to mention this real quick, the Ayurveda, which has 6 different specific flavor profiles. And the thought was your meal should have some of everything so that you are in balance. And if something is out of balance with your body, it means something is out of balance here. And so the thought is you might need more salty or more pungent or more astringent. And you could restore balance by making sure that you had balance in your body and approached life with balance. And I thought that was kind of a cool way to kind of end our presentation. Except for I wanted to kind of throw in a couple of my favorites, samosas, really good. And these like little tiny bread-like donuts that are served in like a sweet sugar sauce or a honey sauce. Fabulous. They don't look like they would be as flavorful as they are, but oh man, if you ever get a chance to try them, do so. And of course, chai. We had a lot of chai. At almost any special meeting that we had, it was part of our welcome ceremony. Little tiny teacups, chai, and usually some kind of sweet or a cookie or a cracker served with it. So that's kind of my highlights of India. I hope that through my presentation you got a little bit of the flavors, the colors, the people, the places, and the experiences. I know it was a whirlwind presentation, but I thank you for hanging in there with me. We don't have tons of time, but I'll answer a few questions for those in the audience that are here. But for everybody else at home, I know you're going to shut off in a minute. So thank you very much. I appreciate it. Does anybody have any questions? Casey. Yeah, there is his question was that's a lot of people, and is every city kind of experiencing some of those problems? Is that kind of your question? Yes, basically yes, because the other thing is, as we know with pollution, air and water, I mean, it's infiltrating into the groundwater, and the air does not just stay over the one little spot where you breathe. So other cities and other rural areas are becoming affected by the pollution as well. I read in researching for my presentation here that they came up with this year a 5-year plan now to try and combat some of these issues. Whether or not they're going to be able to get there or not, I'm not sure, which for those of us as part of this fellowship, we were supposed to be thinking about how can we share what we learned, and can we bring students over there, or can we bring even faculty over there to learn more about India and then have that ripple down effect. I came home and I thought, I don't know if in 2 years, because that's probably how long it would take me to organize a trip, if I would feel okay bringing people back there, knowing how I felt, as sick as I kind of felt. Because the other thing I didn't tell you was that of the 16 of us, there was only myself and one other person who didn't get sick at some point during the trip, and one person had to be hospitalized. It is kind of dire straits, I think, for them. And yes, it's to that point, and they're trying to take action. Whether it's too late or not, I'm not sure, because it's an institutionalized, interwoven, it's not just the water, it's not just the air, it's not just the lack of green space, it's not corruption in the government. There's so many factors. I think it's tough. But again, man, the culture is totally worth saving. It's beautiful. The patriotism and the nationalism and the beauty that's there is phenomenal. So, but yeah, I think it is more widespread. And as you saw, 15 of the 20 most polluted cities in the world are in India. Any other questions? Okay, so the question was, if a person were to want to go to India, would I suggest only going as part of a tour group? That's a tough one for me. I kind of like having some freedom to explore on my own. I think you would have to do a lot of research on your own, but you could do it on your own. You would also probably have more built-in safety structures if you went with a group. So and as a female, that's always something that I'm completely aware of. But as you can see, like my last day, I was traveling all by myself in Delhi, and I felt safe. Would I do that at night? Probably not. I ventured out in the day, but I also knew not to eat vegetables that couldn't be peeled or fruits that couldn't be peeled. Only have bottled water, and we were served. They took very good care of us as part of this fellowship. And again, it's kind of that dichotomy of, here we are studying urban sustainability. Here's your case of plastic bottled water and your hotel, your 4-star, 5-star hotel with hot water showers that, I felt guilty doing, when I did take a shower. But I also knew that for safety reasons, I kind of appreciated that. So there's that give and take, and I think you would have to do some research, but I would be happy to share what I learned too, if that's something you're interested in doing. Tracy. So the question was, does the government have some more sustainable plans? And I think that's part of that 5-year plan that they're proposing now. But again, from what we experienced and what we heard from a lot of our lectures, the corruption within the government is very real and is going to be tough to break. So I think that is in part why there's so many NGOs and so many other businesses that are trying to work at this, but it's going to take the whole picture coming together to solve, I think, the issues that are happening there. But yeah, definitely, there's going to have to be some change from the top down, because otherwise, some of those things are not going to get changed. I mean, the businesses that are polluting the air are not going to stop, and that's again one of those things that comes up here in our country. Where are the regulations for what's safe emissions? Or I know somebody who burns their garbage outside, including plastic and styrofoam, and I'm like, okay, now that please, there are consequences to things, and in India there's so many things that don't have the consequences yet, that until some of those get put into place, you can't just rely on people changing for the sake of change. And I think that's part of the education. One of the statistics I think we heard was like only 4% are educated about what's happening with the environment and how their daily actions are impacting But you think about the poverty level. I mean, we saw women burning garbage on the street, heating water and milk in a plastic water bottle to give to their child. They don't know any better because all they know is they need to get something into their child. So when you're struggling just to have the basics in life, you don't have time to really think about all of the other things that are happening. And so, like one of the NGOs talked about trying to do education with children, because if we could get some of the children to understand the actions that they maybe could influence their parents, or that kind of generational education is really going to be important. But it's not just one thing. Again, there's so many factors coming into play that it has to include government change too. Any other burning questions? Oh, yeah. There was one of the slides there too, like kidney disease, heart disease, lung disease, cancers. All of those are increasing. And I think one of the slides you can go back to, I think in 2017, 124 million deaths were caused and attributed to pollution. 124 million in 2017. So yeah. Yeah. I was going to try and go back to that slide, but that's kind of a bad one to end on. But yeah, Marnie? Yes. It is. There is a lot of spice. But again, those 6 kind of categories. So even like a curry can have a level of spiciness to, like I always joke, sorry, Mom and Dad, throwing you under the bus here, but to them, black pepper is spicy, right? So we know that spicy comes in different kind of styles. So there's the hot spicy, things that maybe we would attribute more to like red peppers, that kind of spicy. But there's also like spicy like cardamoms and cumin and a lot of those other fennel that's used. And so you have, seriously, our buffets had like so many different, and I would get confused as to what was supposed to go with what, because normally I like to try everything, right? But I mean, there would be sauces and rices and breads, and we had one spot where it was like a sweet carrot, but that was a dessert, not to be had on the same plate as your entrees. And so one person, we joked about this the whole week, because he put the carrot sauce and some kind of dessert or something else like entree-ish on the same plate, and somebody came over with a separate plate and scraped it off for him, like, oh, you're really crossing the line there. But I mean, there's different, if you're Indian, you know what's supposed to go with what, and you like the style of food you saw, sometimes they were actually even served in separate little cups, and so then you could work your way around and go from, or if you had something spicy, there was always like a yogurt or some sauce that would cool it off. So it was that balance. There's always balance in Indian food. So yes, it's spicy, but there's always the astringent or the sweet to go with it, or the coolness of the yogurt sauce to cool it down. No, go ahead. No, I don't really think so. I think it was more really just for flavor, because their food is so flavorful. She asked, in case you didn't hear, the question was, do I think that the spices were ever used to hide something? And my answer was no, but I have to say, after seeing all that water and the pollution, fish was a common thing, especially down south. I had a real tough time convincing myself to try any fish, because I thought, I've seen the waters. I don't want, but then I thought, well, crud, I've seen the land too, and the garbage on the land, so the chicken probably isn't as any better. But there was a lot of vegetarian too. A lot of Hindu religion is often vegetarian. A lot of other people choose to be vegetarian, so there was always, when we did have chicken, it was usually not like even like chicken drummies were much smaller, and there was not as much meat as what we would probably be used to here. So the lack of meat didn't seem to bother me so much, but I know that there were some people in our group that were, meat and potatoes. Mom and Dad, you guys would hate it. There was way too spicy and not a lot of the traditional, what we would, call Western food, because we were in India and there were so many other wonderful flavors to have. So, but like I said, I love spicy food and I love the Indian food, but I did have to take a break when I came back and have some mac and cheese and some bland Norwegian food. So, Sue. Yeah, actually the Vivekananda Indian Institute that I had a picture of in there, while we were there, the University of Minnesota had their doctorate program. I see Leland's over here, so that's why I'm pointing to them. But their medical students were over there studying in India because they do a youth program, and then they also do like youth community work out in like clinics. And so the students were being able to come over to India, learn more about Indian culture, and do service learning projects and learn about health and wellness from that perspective. So that was pretty cool. And if I were to bring students or faculty, that would be the spot I would go. And it was in Mysore. And that was one of the least polluted cities. That I guess it maybe was the least polluted city that we visited. So if I were to do that, that would be probably the one spot I would bring faculty or students. Yeah, it's much more expensive. So again, like an Uber ride, 20-minute Uber ride is only like $1. The big fancy seats at the movie theater are kind of like when you go to an opera, you have the different classes of seats. And so when we got there, the only thing left were the most expensive seats, and it was still like $5 for us. So the cost of living would be much higher for them to come here. But yes, that was originally one of the things that we kind of had explored too. Any other questions? Okay, so the question was, the weather looked really nice according to the slides. Was it nice? It was kind of cold up north. I was kind of surprised. Like it was like high and 30s, low 40s a couple of the nights, and maybe mid 40s the rest of the time that we were there. When we were in southern India, then it was warmer. Then it was like 70s. But again, I didn't really talk about this. And yeah, here I am wearing my Gandhi t-shirt. But I would probably not have worn this there because there's still kind of a respect for the culture as a female to have long sleeves. And even you can see the skirts go further down than what we would normally have here in the United States. So they go like more ankle length here, just to kind of keep your body covered. So I was kind of concerned about it being really warm down south, and it was okay. It was not as warm as I was predicting, but there were a couple of days where, yeah, we were sweating. But I kind of was surprised by how cool it was in the northern part of India. But as far as rain, no, I don't think we got rain at all. But we weren't there in the rainy season either. Yeah, we have. Yep, one more question back there. Yeah. So the question, I'm going to kind of summarize and let me know if I'm kind of close here, was kind of like the political situation, both from the Indian standpoint and with Trump back home here. And the answer is there were times where people felt comfortable, and I always wondered, like, what do they think of us as Americans? And the majority of my group, even though we didn't always talk a lot of politics, I could kind of tell where the majority of my group fell on the spectrum. And I was pretty happy that we were mostly like-minded. But there were times where I could tell people were walking kind of precariously about mentioning anything about the United States. And so there would be times where then when we could throw out a joke and they would go, oh, okay, well, good, now that I know how you feel. And so, yeah, I mean, there were a lot of questions like, not to get political here too, I'm walking a fine line, I guess, but there are people that fall on both sides of the spectrum and people that don't always understand how Trump got elected, and those same questions maybe exist there, and we were kind of given those questions sometimes too. But they're in a similar situation too, where some of the people there like their leader and some do not, and feel like the person that's in charge is only taking care of like their people. And not necessarily everybody in the country of India. So in that respect, it was kind of interesting to see some of the comparisons. But as far as like some of the big global issues, the most I heard, not necessarily with pollution, was with the United States not ratifying the UN's child rights document, which the actual formal name I'm slipping on. So, yeah, thanks. So I'm seeing Tracy get a little antsy here, like she wants to wrap it up, but I will stick around. I'm going to take off my mic so that our lovely, thank you videography department here at CLC for videotaping. I really appreciate that. That gives us an opportunity to share this with other people who can't be on campus today. So kudos to our department for doing that. I will stick around and answer any additional questions that you have, or if you want to come up, and there's really nothing of great importance here, but if you want to look, feel free to come up and do that. But otherwise, I'd just like to say thank you again for coming and supporting our cultural arts series and for asking great questions. So thank you very much.